will now be recorded.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this special town council meeting for Thursday, May 7th, 2020. This is the ongoing process for the budget. Before we get into the meeting agenda, I'm going to make an announcement. Members of the public, please keep all of your microphones muted during the meeting unless you are the person asking a question. Also, kindly keep your camera inactive unless you are speaking. This system is not equipped to deal with multiple simultaneous speakers. Only one voice is transmitted at a time. Therefore, please only speak if you have been recognized. If there is a conversation going on, for example, between a counselor and a department head, please allow each other to finish your sentences or finish your questions before you start speaking. I don't have a wooden gavel. I don't need one. I have a mute all button. So if the meeting gets unruly, that's what I'm going to do. I'll also periodically do that to clear up background noise. I find that when the telephone callers initiate contact, they are automatically live and they don't have a way to mute themselves. Once the meeting, we get into the agenda, I'll proceed through the departments in order on the agenda. If you wish to question or comment, please type that into the chat bar that you have a question for a department head. If you look in one of the top corners of your screen, you'll see a little cartoon text bubble. When you click on that icon, you'll see a white strip below it that'll appear on the side of your screen. Please type into that strip your request to speak. I will first look for questions from those who are using a computer or the smartphone app to participate. Once I've heard from all logged in digitally, then I will look for questions from those who have dialed in. At this point, we have 2 telephone callers. If you intend to comment at the beginning of your comment or question, please identify yourself by stating your name and address. Thank you. And with that, please all rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Here.
Laughlin. Laughlin? I can see you, but I can't hear you, but I got you. Marone,
Here.
Morgenstein,
Here.
Shortell,
Here.
Tata,
Here.
Testa,
He's not here.
okay. Zandri,
Here.
excuse me. Chairman Savoni,
Here.
Mayor Dickinson,
Here.
Jim Bowes,
Present.
thank you.
All right, with that, we'll go through the agenda in order. First up is the Public Utilities Commission. This is not the individual utilities, it's the board and it employs the director, Mr. Hendershot. Mr. Hendershot, are you with us?
I am.
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any introductory comments about the PUC budget, just the commission?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there questions from the council for just the Public Utilities Commission, not the individual utilities? Councilor Tada?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only question, just similar to what I'm asking other departments, two questions really. One, has the commission seen any savings? I wouldn't assume so during the pandemic. And if we were to ask you if you could save 1% of the commission's budget next year, would there be any area that you think you would be able to take that from? Thank you.
I'm not sure where that would be. The only things in the commission are the stipends and the meeting fees for each of the three commissioners, some expenses for the chairman, my salary, my secretary's salary, and the anticipated cost of the recording secretary.
Yeah, that's what I had figured. I wasn't sure if the salaries, if maybe there was any change in the benefits amount after the mayor's budget came out. I know some of the insurance might have gone down since then. I'm not sure.
I believe my secretary's benefits and mine come out of the operating divisions.
Okay, so then this wouldn't apply there. Okay, thank you. That was all, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else with questions for the Public Utilities Commission? Any members of the public have questions for the Public Utilities Commission? Anyone on the telephone have questions for the Public Utilities Commission? All right, there being none, we will move on to the electric division. Mr. Bucieri, that's you.
Yes. So I'll just make a few opening remarks, and then we'll field questions. Revenues included in the 2020-21 budget are based on Energy New England's, which is the division's wholesale power procurement agents, projected 2020-2021 wholesale power purchases by the electric division, reduced by 2.7% to account for system losses. The resulting projected retail sales are then applied to the division's proposed 2020-21 retail rates to produce projected annual retail revenue for fiscal year 2020-21. This budget reflects no increases in personnel. We've stayed with the number we had last year. All IBEW clerical and production wages are unchanged for this budget. The collective bargaining agreements with production unit will expire on August 31st, 2020, and the collective bargaining agreements with clerical expires on June 30th, 2020. No wage increases are included in these budgets, except for contractual step increases for certain newer employees. Additionally, the town's collective bargaining agreement with managers union will expire on December 31st of 2020. For operating and maintenance accounts, operating expenses including power supply costs are budgeted to increase by 0.44% or $78,977. The 2019-2020 budget includes amounts necessary to cover retroactive pay as a result of labor contracts. Therefore, several accounts in the 2020-2021 budget will reflect a decrease in labor dollars. For capital accounts, the entire proposed capital budget of $3,823,795 is 2.52% or $98,990 less than the 2019-2020 capital budget of $3,922,785. The proposed 2020-2021 capital budget compares favorably to the 2020-2021 budgeted depreciation expense of $3,586,335. That's it.
All right, thank you. First up is Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, sir. I want to focus on line 909 on page 69, the conservation line. And that's an expense line, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And I'm looking at the trending on that. You know, it's a line of concern to me because our ratepayers pay into this and at a certain level, and I don't know that that money that's being paid is actually being used. So I look at the trend on that line. What?
Go ahead.
Okay, I just heard somebody else talking. So if I look at the trend on that line, looking at the second column, which would indicate 7 months of expenditures, if I was to take that and amortize that out over a year, I would end up with about 1.175, whereas last year, what was approved for the entire year was 1.9. So can you explain the disparity there?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, this is Rick Hendershot. I'm not on camera, so I maintain adequate social distance from Mr. Bucari. One, a lot of these expenditures are project driven, and if customers don't bring projects forward, we have no incentive payments to make in support of those projects. Additionally, we've suspended now for several weeks the home energy savings program. We didn't want to encourage contractors going into customers' homes and doing the energy evaluations and the installation of energy saving measures. So I think that's,
Okay, well,
I think that's what you see here.
well, I don't think I see the suspension in the home energy program because these numbers are booked as of January 31st.
Unmute me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's a good point. You're
Okay.
you'd be correct about that.
So the only other portion that would be reflected of the decrease in the utilization of these funds is lack of utilization by ratepayers.
Correct.
So is the amount that we charge the ratepayers to go into that line, is it fixed or
Yeah.
is it a variable determined by our town, you guys?
It's a quarter of a cent for every kilowatt hour. So every kilowatt hour we sell, every kilowatt hour that goes through a meter has a quarter of a cent attached to it that we collect.
Okay, who determines that it's a quarter of a cent?
The state of Connecticut, the legislature did.
And those monies, if they're not utilized, you just bank them?
Well, they stay on our retained earnings. We partition them off. You'll see in here on line 909 a change from the original 1920 appropriation to the total appropriation as of 1/31/20. It went up about $400,000. You'll see go from 1,593,905 to 1,901,039.
Yes.
Okay, that was a result of a budget amendment to move unspent monies from retained earnings into the budget. So they would be available if the need arose. That's an example of the sort of thing that happens most years. The programs don't quite spend everything that's collected. And that's good in a way because there's no other source of funds for this. So we'd get into a real cash flow problem if the programs were subscribed and used beyond what the revenues were collected.
And if I recall correctly, it's the utilization of retained earnings that the commission has used over the last few years to try and stabilize electric rates.
Well, different dollars inside those retained earnings, but
Different
yes.
bucket.
Okay, so retained earnings
Never
is,
use energy efficiency money for anything other than energy efficiency.
yeah, that's why when you said that, I thought it was a little strange, but so when you took the money from the conservation account, the retained earnings in that account, and they were shifted, and I think the council approved that. What was it utilized for?
So those dollars, they go into retained earnings if they're not spent during like this current fiscal year. If we don't spend the dollars, they will go into retained earnings. And we'll have to go to the council and next year and request an appropriation from the retained earnings portion of these dollars to be transferred into the current fiscal year for use. And that's what you saw in the appropriation that was on 13120 that brought it from the 1.593 to 1.901. So that's something we'll plan to do on an annual basis so that whatever's unspent that goes into retained earnings gets shifted into the current fiscal year for use on energy efficiency projects. It's never mixed. It goes into retained earnings in a special bucket for energy efficiency, and it gets moved into the current fiscal year for energy efficiency.
So the programs that are available to ratepayers, we have the home energy program for residential ratepayers where somebody comes in and reviews and tries to make their home more energy efficient. Is that the only program that we have for residential ratepayers?
That's largely it. There is some
Air conditioning.
we have a prescriptive air conditioning program,
The heat pump water
and then there's an appliance program for heat pump water heaters, and there is some lower cost lighting, in essence LED bulbs in the stores that the prices were bought down via our efforts.
Well, how does that work? The prices are brought down in stores by the efforts of the electric division.
We work with a vendor that works with the stores, and in the supply chain, dollars are injected into it that results in the store being able to charge less for the bulb.
And how are you assured that the end user is charged that lower charge?
There's a separate company that monitors the program, and there's a fee schedule that is set up and describes what the cost of those bulbs are. We can actually walk into the stores and see them ourselves. Now, I may have overstated this a bit because this program is surprisingly expensive at the big box stores, and it was swamping our program of our monies a few years ago. And so we elected to leave it. We stopped participating at the big boxes like Home Depot and Lowe's, but I believe at Walmart and some other stores, this is still available.
All right, so those are the residential. Do we have similar programs for commercial?
Not really. Commercial is very project driven. We have a very robust lighting retrofit program where businesses work with a contractor or a vendor to replace their lights, and they can go online and there's forms that they can look at, will guide the contractor in estimating and reporting the proposed job. And that's where the bulk of the commercial monies get spent. We also will work with customers that want to propose more sophisticated and extensive equipment changeouts. Manufacturing equipment, air compressors are a very popular item for our program to help support the replacement of. We've also worked on some manufacturing lines where whole lines of equipment have been replaced with higher efficiency ones. And we will monetize that difference in cost between a low efficiency and a high efficiency equipment. That becomes the value of the project, and then work on the energy savings realized by that higher efficiency equipment.
Are those monies available to the town for utilization of conservation projects?
Yes.
Has anybody asked you about there's a lot of talk about community pool, complaints about the amount of water that filtration needs to be fixed. Has anybody asked you, the electric division, about perhaps using some of these funds to have a conservation electric project for the community pool?
I don't believe so. Our energy efficiency and conservation specialist is not here this evening. Did not ask him to stay for the meeting. He would know instantly if we had been approached. That would require the project having been details specified and bid, because all we could respond to is a choice in the purchase of equipment, filtration equipment, pumps, motors, things of that nature. And it would have to be articulated and described to us what's the difference in efficiency and the difference in price between alternatives, so that they could be evaluated and an incentive payment determined. And I don't think the pool design is that far yet.
Yeah, I think maybe there's some opportunities if, the right people are in the room together talking about this, but all right, well, thank you. And, we might have a conversation offline over the next coming weeks, but thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Anyone else on the council? Mayor, did you have a comment, or is that all set? Next up is Councilor Tata.
I'm fine.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I just had one question on line 419 on page 70. It looks like it's the interest income was originally at 388,000, and then the approved dropped to 277,000. Was that just an accounting adjustment, or explain that?
This is Tom Sullivan from Electric, and that was on advice from the Comptroller's Office. They revisited the rate of return on investments, and it was decreased. I think the original amount was based on 1.4, the revised amount on 1.0%.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. If there is nothing else from the council, we'll move on to the public. Mr. Bucheri, I believe you have received questions from Adelheid Kofer. I think there were, I counted 18. Do you have those?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And can you read and respond to them, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So for electric, questions I have here are, and I'll read hers off verbatim and then I'll respond. On page 67, accounts 440, 442, and 445, reflecting a general decrease in usage, and then in parentheses, before 2/2020, or better efficiency or changes in usage patterns due to current stay-at-home order. The response to that is basically it's just a lower wholesale cost of about 0.5% and less energy sales projection, plus the acknowledgement of 1 day less due to the leap year in 1920.
Yeah, what those lines reflect is lower revenues. Those numbers on page 67 are dollars. They are not kilowatt hours. And so it reflects what we think will be total fewer dollars collected because of falling wholesale power prices.
All right, the next question is also on page 67, count 445. The question was, is public authority all municipal users, including schools, public works, in parentheses, $853,000, parks and rec, senior center, et cetera, and how much could be saved with more energy efficiency upgrades over all municipal buildings? The response is yes, it is all the municipal users. And as far as what can be saved, projects would have to be proposed and analyzed for the payback periods and for application of available funds. I mean, that we'd have to work with all town departments, and projects would have to be proposed by others for us to analyze and see how those dollars would be applied.
Also reading into her question, the parenthetic 853,000 after Public Works, that must be what Public Works has budgeted for electricity. Note that Public Works pays the street light bills for the town, and there's 4,000 or so of those.
Right.
Streetlight costs have been coming down the last few years as
LED replacements.
LED replacements go into all failed streetlights, and we have a lower rate for those because they use less energy.
Moving on to the next question on page 67 again, account 454. Please remind me which electric property is referred to for rent revenue of $132,000. And that $132,000 is what we collect for pole attachments from through our pole attachment agreements. Next question is on page 67 again. 456, please explain phase out. Does this refer to revenue from former shares in power generation? No, that does not. That is for engineering studies for pole attachers. That's dollars that we get paid for conducting studies for others to attach equipment to our poles. Moving down, page 68, count 555 is falling expense in 2020, 2021 due to decrease in usage or to falling purchasing costs for electricity, or what else? And that the response is it's lower wholesale power cost and a small amount of sale decrease. It's about 0.5% down. Next question is on page 68. 570, please explain the increase. The increase here is mainly due to we have 8 115,000 volt kV SF6 breakers in our substations. There's 6 at our substation here on East Street, and then 1 in North Wallingford and 1 at Colony. Those are all due for a refurbishment. And that's what most of those dollars are associated with. Also some foundation repairs for some concrete that's falling on the North Wallingford substation structural piers. Next question is on page 68. And this is for 583, 584, 593, and 594. And the question is, please explain why underground lines, and in parentheses, much fewer lines to my knowledge, incur almost triple the operating expense of overhead lines, while at the same time only 6% of the maintenance cost of overhead lines. And that's inaccurate. The dollars that are in those budgets for underground, there's the distribution technician is in the underground budget, and there's also Call Before You Dig, which is a program that we participate in for safe digging, overtime and overhead hours. And in 593 and 594, 593, which is overhead lines, that includes the tree trimming maintenance, and also all the pole shifts that we do. Anytime we set new poles are a capital asset, but shifting an existing wire or an existing transformer is a maintenance cost. So the maintenance costs are captured in those buckets. Next item is on page 68, and it's 904. Please explain triple and uncollectible accounts in 19 and 20. The $220,000 is an average amount of uncollectibles over the course of several years. The earlier year was an extraordinarily low year. And a lot of times what we see is when we budget for a certain amount, and then because we have to write it off in that particular year, and then in following years, through bankruptcies and everything, we end up getting some of that money back, and it gets applied to the previous year. So those dollars change. Let's see, page 69, 920 and 926. So for 920, the question was, is there any chance to renegotiate or revisit health insurance premiums? And in parentheses, it says Board of Ed received different rates during the process. As far as 920 goes, those are negotiated wages through contracts. There are personal vacancies reflected in the actuals, which is making it appear lower. And as far as 926, that does reflect the adjusted healthcare premiums and the introduction of HSA plans for a couple of collective bargaining agreements. Page 69, 923, please explain what kind of outside services are bought for the $1.1 million. This is mostly proportionate charges for services that the division receives from the town, which include HR services, law, and finance. That's about $846,000 is made up of that. And then there's also dollars included for the audit, some legal expenses, and some consulting services. Page 69, 408. Question is, I was under the impression that WED does not pay property taxes, but instead of transfer to the general fund, $1.8 million, or roughly. Please specify what taxes are listed here. There's 2.285 million. And then please, that's that. Okay, so the response there is, wait a minute, so that was, I missed that here. So that's gross earnings tax paid to the state of Connecticut, as well as taxes paid to North Branford for property that we have in North Branford. Basically, our poles, wires, our assets in that town.
And to that point, I'll add that customers in North Branford pay a slightly higher purchase power cost adjustment by which the division collects the property taxes that we have to remit to North Branford.
All right, the next is also on page 69, and it's 909. The question there was, please explain the additional $400,000 adjustment on January 31, 2020. What funds and what programs? I believe we covered this under Councilor Fishbein's questions, but that's basically, it was an appropriation from retained earnings from dollars unspent in previous years that are made available in this year's budget. Next, on page 70, 419, please explain the mayor's decrease. Why is this interest, where is this interest dividend coming from? That was, again, a question that was asked, and I believe Tom Sullivan, the business manager, responded to. It was a revised lower interest rate on cash that was provided by the comptroller. Page 70, items 411 and 411. Please explain the $15,000 gain and the $60,000 loss with disposition of utility plant. And here, the gain was basically when we get rid of material, if we're reconductoring or scrapping material, old transformers, the transformer cans go into a bin. We get scrap value for that from a vendor, so we get money back for that. And then there's loss. The $60,000 losses is in a separate line under 411 as well, and that's a majority of that is made up on loss on meters and lights that are not fully depreciated. There was a question there. I'll get into 421, page 70. Please explain the $4 million drop in miscellaneous non-operating revenue between fiscal year 18 and 19 and 1920. That was basically, there was the CMEC settlement money of $3.67 million was in the 18-19 actuals. Page 70, 418, which rental is referred to in this case, the $1.5 million. That's for the Pierce facility and also Wallingford Energy rental income. Page 71, is retained earnings about the same as the Board of Ed unencumbered funds of 2% funds? Please explain appropriation to retained earnings drop between 1920. What does that indicate going forward related to 5-year capital plan? That's just dollars collected and not spent, and per Connecticut state statute, we're required to earn between 5 and 8% on our investments as an ROI. So that's something that occurs basically on an annual basis. Again, on page 71, there was several accounts where 362, 364, 390, 368, and 392. I'll address each one, but it's please explain the increase from 1920 to 2021. In 362, there was actually a decrease, and that was mainly due to capital carry forward funds that were available. 364, the same thing, there was a decrease, and that was due to capital carry forward funds available. 390, there was an increase, and that is for phase 1 of renovations to the 100 John Street building, which will potentially be allocated to a new roof on the building because the existing rubber membrane roof is approaching the end of its useful life, and we've been repairing leaks on an annual basis. 368 is 368 is okay. 368 is for transformer purchases. 392, there's an increase there, and that's for transportation equipment for a line truck. Last year was slightly less because we didn't purchase a full-size line truck. We purchased a smaller, what we call a squirt boom, which can be used for services and also be used in our substations. It can get around in our substation yards and underneath the bus work. And then I believe the last question was on page 71/72. It says 364. Seems like poles and fixtures are quite a costly item. Can we revisit comparison between overhead and underground operation and maintenance in context of the walkability study? It was stated that underground is much more expensive. Those dollars are for pole replacements. We replace poles as they age out or break. As far as the underground versus overhead and these are funded every year in our budget, and we replace them with cash. We never take out any debt. In order to underground large portions of the town, it would require taking out debt, and we're talking, tens of millions of dollars to do anything significant. And I don't see what the return would be on that. The overhead construction is, easier to troubleshoot and easier to repair when something goes down. Putting everything underground, there's a huge upfront expense. And then anytime there's an outage, although they would be less frequent, they take much longer to fault locate and much longer to repair, and it's much more costly to repair. So that's all I've got as far as written questions in from the public that we received prior to the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bucheri. I got a thank you message from Adelheid Kofer, and Councilor Morgenstein, I believe, has a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. Way back at the very beginning, I believe you were stating a cost that had gone down, an expense due to the pandemic, and you cut out, just as you said, what that percentage of cost was. Probably fuel to run our power plant, with the cost of fuel being lower.
No, we don't run a power plant, ma'am. We
yeah.
lease the Pierce property to CMEC. And
Right. I'm sorry.
So we
but
don't.
There was some.
Well, we project our wholesale power costs in the upcoming fiscal year to go down, in part because of a 0.5% projected decrease in sales in volume, largely due to the fact that the upcoming year has one less day in it because we just experienced a leap year. And
Okay, so that's what I missed, that 0.5%.
And wholesale power costs are forecasted themselves to go down in the coming year because of lower known market costs at the independent system operator and anticipated continued low energy costs due to lower prices of fuel, namely natural gas.
Right. And so that amount that I missed, it literally cut out right as you said that was a 0.5% then?
That's in unit sales. And then the dollars flow from that to a certain extent. But most of the reduction is due to lower costs for wholesale power, which will be reflected in a lower power cost adjustment on customers' bills.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, it literally just cut out right as he said the number. And then the only other question that I came up with as you were answering her questions was, we've been for years now replacing with LED lights as we're replacing burned out fixtures, and we're seeing savings as we have more of the LED lights on board. Does there come a point, has anyone projected out if, for example, we reach that we've replaced 50% of our lights with LED, there come a point where you're saving in having lights that it's worth the manpower to just say, okay, we only have, for example, a half left to go or 30% left to go or some number to go, where it's time to simply say, okay, let's use the manpower, replace them all, because now as you've figured your savings, you're now at a break-even point to just finish it rather than to just do it on an as-needed basis.
Remember, this replacement is a cost to the division, but it's a savings to town government. Town government is our customer here. And so the division runs as an independent business. And so what the division is doing is spending money so that a customer can realize a lower bill. And so there's never
so that makes the answer.
So there's never an economic point at which it makes sense for the division to
do it,
accelerate its efforts in the spending of resources to replace functioning high pressure sodium lights with that would be scrapped, and we would take an on the books loss on ahead of their regular failure.
So that would be more if there were a philosophical will to do it come from,
Yes, yes, what you've described as
other
sort of
side.
a policy
Okay,
matter,
yeah.
not an economic one.
yeah. Okay, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thanks so much.
All right, and before we move on, I see 4 on the telephone. Any of the telephone callers have questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Bucieri. Mr. Hendershot, I suspect you're going to stick around.
I suspect.
And we're moving on to the Water Division. Mr. Amwake, you are up.
Good evening, thank you. So we'll tackle the Water Division first and go through questions with that, and then we will move to the Sewer Division. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you and acknowledge Water Division staff and business office staff who really do a lot of the heavy lifting for this budget preparation, specifically William Phelan, Larry Regan, and our Water Division leadership. So with that, we will jump into revenue for the Water Division. Billed consumption continues on a downward trend. Metered sales for fiscal year 21 were computed via a straight line regression equation based on the previous 10 fiscal years, forecasted forward to fiscal year 21. The water rate remains unchanged since June 1, 2015 at $4.09 per CCF or 100 cubic feet. For fiscal year 21, the Water Division proposes utilizing $947,277 from retained earnings, cash for rate stabilization. So looking at the Water Division operating expenses, for the water unit, labor rates for fiscal year 21 are compared to labor rates fiscal year 18, since the collective bargaining agreement was not settled until June 13, 2019. Thus, the labor rate increases shown in the budget are for 3 years. And as Tony mentioned, the labor rates for managers are current, though will expire at the end of this calendar year. Looking at the expense side for the Water Division, I want to highlight 3 specific line items for capital projects. Account 332, water treatment equipment. We include proposed funding of $615,000 for SCADA upgrade and replacement at the Pistapog Water Treatment Plant. The Water Division was previously in front of both the Public Utilities Commission and the Town Council for a bid waiver. The current SCADA equipment at the Pistapog Water Treatment Plant is original to the plant construction circa 1992-1993. Another expense for the capital projects is line item 342, which proposed funding of $675,000 for exterior and interior painting of the larger Masonic water storage tank and funding of $62,000 for exterior roof painting of the west side tank. Because we do have 2 large capital projects for fiscal year 21, no water main replacement contracts are planned. Instead, we will be focusing on the installation of the upgraded SCADA system and the painting of our storage tanks. So those are some highlights for the Water Division. And with that, we will jump into questions.
All right, do any counselors have questions regarding the Water Division budget? Counselor Fishbein, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Neil. Nice to Nice to speak with you this evening. I'm looking on page 77. There's an entry at line 396 at the bottom. It's the double entry of 396. What is that, and why wasn't that able to be effectuated in a prior year?
One second.
It's on page 77, I'm sorry.
Yeah, nope, I have a lot of papers in front of me.
I may be able to help you, Counselor Fishbein, on that particular question. This is Bill Phelan, I'm the office manager for the Water and Sewer Division.
Sure.
So that particular item is a appropriation for a backhoe that the Water Division had planned on purchasing. And we have gone out to bid a number of times with respect to that particular purchase. That has not come to fruition at this point. There's been numerous issues with the bidders and the bids that have come in. In fact, we have just received a bid, I believe it was this week, for the backhoe again, that we will be reviewing and either approving or denying. But we actually put it in the next year's budget because we were not sure that we would have a purchase order in place. And if we do not have a purchase order in place by the end of this fiscal year for that particular appropriation, that money would be reappropriated back to retained earnings.
So because the electric division operates, and this is more of an accounting question, I guess. You know, in general government, when we have this stuff and it doesn't get expended, the money reverts back to the general fund. If this entry was not here, although approved in a prior year, I would expect last year, and not expended, it just goes back to retained earnings, which is, I guess, comparative to the general fund. Is that fair?
It would go back to retained earnings. And we would have no appropriation available to purchase a backhoe in the following fiscal year.
Okay, so it works like appropriations in force. Okay. The other thing is, and I haven't heard anything lately, in fact, it's been a while. Where are we on phosphorus?
I'll refer that question to the general manager.
Well, I think I'd like to tackle phosphorus on the sewer side of the house.
Okay, that's fair. I'll reserve my question until we get there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, excuse me, from the council? I don't see any other questions from the council. Mr. Amwake, do you have Ms. Kofer's questions?
I do.
Would you like to take a crack at some of those?
Sure. And so I have type A engineer, I have numbered each of them, so we will go through. Question 1, page 70, and I will read her questions verbatim, and then we have responses. Page 73, line item 461. While revenue from metered sales seems to have stayed about the same for fiscal year 18-19 to January 31st, 20, it dropped considerably within the last 4 months. Is decreased due to loss of customers before 2/20 or higher efficiency for current stay-home order. So winter sales traditionally are at the lowest, water sales traditionally are at the lowest during the winter months. Remember that the water and sewer divisions bill quarterly, so there is a lag between actual use, water production, and sales and collections. We have seen a slight decrease in water production due to the stay home, stay safe order, though do not have a full picture of the impact at this time. Question 2, page 73, line item 472. Please explain decrease 18-20. T-Mobile did not renew their lease for occupancy of one of the water storage tanks as of August 2019, resulting in an approximate revenue loss of $46,000 per year. Also, the lease for the Young's Apple Orchard Tower was executed with the new lease effective September 2019 for a difference of a decrease of approximately $35,000 per year. Please note that the police and fire department's new radio system occupies the Young's Apple Orchard Tower at a favorable rate of $1 per year. Question 3, page 73, line item 602. Please explain increase in purchase. If due to low reservoir levels, will that trend continue? Answer 3. Please refer to the actual columns. There has not been an actual increase in the purchase of water. This line item is a conservative estimate for the purchase of water from the Meriden Water Company, which supplies properties in the South Broad Street service area, Coles Plaza. These properties are located in Wallingford, though can only be served hydraulically from the Meriden public water distribution system. This line item does not refer to or relate to reservoir levels. Question 4, page 73, line item 623. Please explain increase 1820. Answer 4. The line item is based on a 5-year rolling average for electrical pumping costs, specifically for the raw water pump stations in the Pistapog water treatment plant. The actual yearly electrical power needs depends on the precipitation and drought conditions, cognizant of water demand, and the division's water management approach with regard to effective impoundment for each of the reservoirs. Question 5, page 74, line item 642. Please explain increase 1820. Answer 5. The increase is due to labor rate increases since the prior budgets did not reflect wage increases, as the previous water unit contract expired June 30, 2018, fiscal year 17-18, and was not settled until June 13, 2019. Additionally, the previous management unit prior collective bargaining agreement expired on December 31, 2017, again, fiscal year 17-18, and was not settled until April 2nd, 2019. Thus, this line item captures multiple years of wage and salary increases. Question 6, page 64, line item 665. Please explain increase 1820, more than double for miscellaneous. Answer 6. This was due to a reallocation of engineering section labor and benefit expenses based on a projection of future work and staff assignments. Question 7, page 74, line item 920, 926. Any chance to renegotiate or revisit health insurance premiums? Parentheses, Board of Ed received different rates during process, end parentheses. Question 7, answer 7. This is a matter between the Town Human Resources Department and the various collective bargaining agreements. The health premiums are provided to the Water and Sewer Division's business office by the Human Resources Department during the budget preparation process. Please note that both the water unit and the management unit have adopted a high deductible health savings account with the union for the sewer operations staff currently in arbitration with the town. Question 8, page 74, line item 923. Any chance the outside services could be done in-house? $236,185, or 87.85% of this account, is attributable to town proportionate charges, a portion of town hall functions that the water division, and similar the sewer division, pays for Department of Law, Human Resources, purchasing, etc., as well as data processing support and meter reading conducted by the electric division, plus audit and arbitration fees. Question 9, page 74, $3,278,075. Total operating expense increased between fiscal year 19 and 3/31/20 at about $1 million. Major cost increases being 623 power purchase pumping, 100,000, 642 operation labor and expense, 130, 665 miscellaneous, 70,000, 677 hydrants. Page 75, 419 interest and dividends, 100,000. Together with decreased revenue from metered sale and overall change from net income 817,942 to net loss 700,000 seems to be a major concern ahead of the phosphorus upgrade. Please explain, comment. Answer 9. The citizen is incorrectly commingling the water division net income with tertiary phosphorus expenses, which are captured in the sewer budget. There is a bright line between the water division and the sewer division with two separate chart of accounts or ledgers. The two divisions are two distinct businesses with separate financial records as well as rules and regulations. Further, it is inaccurate to compare the fiscal year 18-19 actual audited budget numbers with proposed fiscal year 2021 budget numbers. We cannot predict personnel vacancies, capital cost changes, or favorable and unfavorable variances between budgeted revenues and expenses and actual costs incurred during the upcoming fiscal year. Question 10, page 75, line item 419. Please explain mayor's decrease in interest dividend income. Where is this interest dividend coming from? Answer 10. During the budget process between the department request and PUC approval in the mayoral approval stages, the treasury rates plummeted. This line item is for investment of cash reserves plus any cash above minimum reserves. Please see the impact on financial markets due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
I think you covered all of them. And just looking at the email by which the questions were transmitted, there was a question for PUC that is at the end of the email. Mr. Hendershot, did you catch that question? And forgive me if you answered it during your presentation.
I think I touched on it, Mr. Chairman, but for the record, I don't mind reading it in and answering it again.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
I strive for helpful, sir. Page 62, count 51,000. Please explain why the PUC, 3 members, 1 management, 2 staff, regular salaries and wages is at $278,771 compared to town council, 9 members, 1 staff at $50,500. Page 13, line 51,000. I can't comment on the town council budgets and costs, but that number for the PUC budget includes my salary and the full-time salary of an executive secretary, as well as the costs for the 3 commissioners. I think therein lies the difference. There's not a department head type person associated with town council.
That is correct. The town council salaries line is just the 9 counselor salaries, which is somewhere in the 6,000 plus range. We're still on water. Are there any questions, any other questions from the council regarding the water division? Any questions from the public? First, those using computer devices. Anybody have questions? And any questions from the telephone callers? All right. Thank you, Mr. Amwake. Don't go anywhere. We're moving on to the sewer division.
Thank you. Okay. Sewer division revenue. similar approach as the water division, with meter sales based on a 10-year straight line regression equation forecasted forwarded to fiscal year 2021. The consumption sewer rate as of October 1, 2020, although for budgetary purposes, it was included as a July 1 start, is projected to be $5.64 per CCF or 100 cubic feet. The basic service fee across all meter sizes is projected to increase 7.43% as the sewer division refines the basic service fee cost allocation and implements allocation of the base service fee based on American Water Works factors versus the current purchase cost of each meter. For the sewer division budget, we propose to utilize $311,968 from retained earnings or cash for rate stabilization. Then highlighting a few operating expense items. Account 652 has an increase of $122,300. This budget includes $5,500 for 2 belt filter presses, $8,000 for screening compactor parts, and $12,000 for bar screen parts. And the proposed budget also includes funding for 3 RBC drives, $90,000, plus 14 RBC bearings at $50,000, $50,000 for 2 RBC shafts, and a modest decrease of $5,000 for UV equipment. And highlighting another operating expense item is line item 673, a decrease of $140,579 or 13.46 cents. And this is a decrease in labor and benefits for labor allocated to this line item based on a review of actual time for prior years and projections for fiscal year 21. A decrease of $16,000 for flow tote maintenance, a decrease of $50,000 for inflow and infiltration reimbursements based on historical reimbursements, and a decrease of $30,000 for lateral sealing as the sewer division focuses on private sanitary sewers and manhole repairs for the upcoming fiscal year. And one other operating expense is a projected decrease of $211,200 or 48.42% decrease for regulatory commission expenses. This is due to a decrease in the cost to purchase nitrogen credits due to calendar year 2019 nitrogen effluent limits. For calendar year 18, the average daily nitrogen discharge was 529 pounds per day, while for calendar year 19, the average daily nitrogen discharge was 413 pounds per day. This line item assumes that the cost per nitrogen credit remains unchanged at $7.07. So those are just some highlights for the town council's edification on the sewer division budget.
Thank you for edifying us. Are there any questions from the council? First up, Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So where are we on the phosphorus in general?
So we are moving forward. So we started primary construction in September of 2019. So I do provide monthly, we call them the just-in-time update to the Public Utilities Commission, because on the third Tuesday of each month, because I usually get it done around 6:15 prior to the 6:30 meeting. So looking at the site, the anaerobic basin is completely, the concrete is in, the forms have been removed, and right now we are in the process of backfilling around the anaerobic basin, as well as removing the sheeting on the west, the northern, and the eastern sides. The concrete has been poured and the forms have been removed for the intermediate pumping station. The tertiary phosphorus building, right now we are in the midst of pouring the concrete for the exterior walls. That is actually a two-story building. The basement level or the lower level is actually below grade. And then we are also currently working on the UV and post-aeration building. And so the floor slabs for that are in, and majority of the exterior walls are in as well. And so we are still looking at a late winter 21, early spring 22 to be up and running. For the new tertiary phosphorus effluent requirements, we need to be up and running April 1, 2022. So it is moving forward. It's a tight site.
And the expenditures for that project, where are they reflected in this budget, if at all?
Bill, you want to tackle that one? So.
This is Bill Phelan, and as you recall, the council had approved a $60 million funding ordinance, which was allocated towards this phosphorus project. And it is not a budgeted item. It is a funding ordinance at this point in time. Once that, once the project is completed, the funding, the loan obligations, and the grant money will be booked in the actual operating and capital budgets of the sewer division. And so you'd really do not see a actual expenditure of money in the operating or capital budgets of the sewer division because it is a funding ordinance.
So
However,
where would one find those numbers?
You could easily contact my office and I could provide those to you on a monthly basis. I actually provide them on a quarterly basis to the Public Utility Commission. And if you'd like them more frequently, I could provide them as well.
There's no aspect of that project that's reflected in this budget?
Actually, there is.
Okay.
Surprisingly, it's a major component of the sewer budget in account number 427. On page, excuse me. On page 80, the interest expense that is appropriated for fiscal year 2021 goes to $366,900 from a previous year of $11,300, which is our estimate. And it is only an estimate because we do not know how much the state of Connecticut or the percent of completion is going to be for this project by June 30th of 2021. But we have come up with an educated estimate of what the loan value at 2% will be that the town will incur for the next fiscal year. We've estimated that at $358,000.
So just to be clear, that the town would incur or the sewer division would incur?
The sewer division.
Okay, I just, okay.
Yes.
The other thing is, there was a number that jumped out at me. You know, I should have marked it. Of course I didn't. Mr. Chairman, can I defer so I can look for this and then I'll come back? That's all I have one other area of inquiry. I just can't find it in my book right now.
Sure. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions from the council? And Mr. Amwake, I believe you've covered all of Ms. Kofer's questions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I got it, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll let you have it.
Thank you. The line on page 81, the reserve for I&I. So
Number?
there isn't a line number. It's the section is titled use of funds.
Correct.
Okay. And I&I is inflow and infiltration. I believe this is the program that we started a few years ago to incentivize homeowners or perhaps commercial that had illegal hookups, that we would pay a portion of correcting that. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay, and that's the line that reflects the money that the reserve for people to utilize.
So if you look at that page, there are actually two lines. There is one that's called the reimbursement program, which is an actual reimbursement to customers who repair that type of I&I problem that they have in their existing property. That represents $125,000 of the I&I program. The other $177,000 of the I&I reserve expense comes from the fact that we have hired an individual to administer this program, as well as all of his benefits, supplies, and any other ancillary expenses that we may incur with respect to mailing expenses, door hangers, and just miscellaneous expenses that come with the administration of this program at $177,800.
Okay, okay, I see that. That's on the inspector / lateral / manholes line.
Correct. So we are also in the process of lining various service connections for our customers, which is approximately $50,000 out of that 177,000.
Okay, so this inspector individual, it's a new position, correct?
It's been in the sewer division for the last 3 years I'm sorry,
Bill,
go ahead.
Since June 27, 2016.
Okay, so I want to look at the reimburse program line in conjunction with the reserve for I&I line. Okay, they're both the program, correct?
Correct.
And the reimburse program is the money that actually goes out to homeowners?
Correct.
And what is the difference in the reserve line?
The difference in the reserve line.
Under use of funds,
Yes.
when you
So, okay, now I understand what your question is. Good question. Thank you. So every year in the past, the sewer division has appropriated from their revenues $350,000 to be appropriated to this reserve. And you can see that if you look at fiscal year budget 1920 and prior years. So what we've done is we've said we have a substantial reserve in this I&I account. And until we start distributing this reserve to our customers and bringing it to a level that is sufficient for reimbursements, we are not going to continue to appropriate $350,000 to this reserve. This year, it's only going to be $50,000. The current reserve balance in the I&I reserve at 6/30/19 was over $2 million. We thought it was inappropriate to appropriate another $350,000 to that reserve when we are only spending $310,000 in a budget. We know that there are major I&I issues that we have to address that we have not fully addressed at this point, but they're coming. And until that point, we thought it was inappropriate for us to continue building this reserve. So we cut back, and we will now use the source of funds, the $300,000 approximately $300,000 each year, until we can draw this $2 million reserve down to a point where we have needed more money, and then we will have to appropriate more money in future years' budgets for a use of funds. Not sure if you're following.
No, I heard what you said. I just want to explore a little bit.
Okay.
With regard to that. So my question is, looking at that reserve for I&I line, why does 350,000 appear in the first column, which is usually indicative of expenditure?
So I'm not sure what the first column you're referring to is. Is that the
Okay. The first column on our budget book indicates that for fiscal year ending 6/30/19, which would have been the prior tax year.
Yes, okay, I got you.
That for that line, there was $350,000 expended.
Correct, that is an actual number. If you look at it, that is an actual number. So the budget for fiscal year 18/19 had an approved appropriation of $350,000 to that reserve.
Yes.
Once that appropriation is approved, that is the amount of money that goes to the reserve. Regardless, that is the amount of money that goes to that reserve.
Oh, okay. I think what I'm looking at is
You'll see the same thing in fiscal year 19/20.
yeah, I think it's a fault of the way that the budget is presented. What you're saying is that money didn't go out to reimburse people.
No.
That's what was set aside.
We have a reserve. We have $2 million of cash in the bank to allocate for future I&I improvements. And we thought it was inappropriate for us to continue on a level of $350,000 when we have a $2 million reserve balance and are only spending $300,000 a year.
No, I understand the philosophy, and
Okay.
I'm supportive of philosophy, but I'm looking at the numbers.
Okay.
So for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, how much was spent from the reserve that was set aside for I&I?
$204,000.
Well, okay. Well, that number appears in a.
Sorry, that's a year to date. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Can you repeat that, Counselor? I apologize.
Sure. For fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, how much money was spent for I&I reimbursement?
So to find that number, look up above in the same column, 1819, and you will see the front appropriation from the I&I reserve of $132,769 for the inspector and the laterals. Yes?
Yes, I see that.
And 39,000 for actual reimbursements to customers.
Okay,
So
so,
a total of, so we did what, 172,000.
understood. Okay, so it's just the way the book is set up, because ordinarily this first column is actual expenditures, but it appears that the upper section of the page that I'm looking at is expenditure, and the lower section is reserves.
Is the appropriation to the reserve.
Yeah, okay. So taking that a step further,
Okay.
we talked about the water division budget. We had a appropriation for the backhoe, right? Because
Yes.
that money, if it wasn't expended in that budget year, would have gone to retained earnings. Why isn't this budget line treated in the same manner?
The PUC has adopted a policy for this reserve particularly. And what it policy says is that any connection charges that are generated, and a connection charge, by a connection charge, I mean a new customer coming into the Wallingford water or sewer system, and this for water and sewer it pertains to, any new customers or any customer that increases the number of meters or the size of their meter will have to pay a connection charge because their use of the system increases. So existing customers have paid for a water treatment plant and a sewer treatment plant with a capacity that exceeds the existing usage. And we feel that it is inappropriate for customers that come into our system to reimburse those customers that have already paid for this plant, though these plants in total, to pay their fair share of the cost of these plants.
Okay, but I thank you for that. But what I'm looking at is like last year, in this line, $350,000 was appropriated. Only 10% of it was used, about 10%, 39,000, right?
Correct.
No,
No, last year there was 170,000 used from it.
Oh, because it's the two numbers put together.
The two numbers put together.
Okay. But whatever's left over, which is like 200,000, okay?
Yeah.
Why doesn't that revert to retained earnings at the end of the year instead of accumulating the $2 million? Because with the backhoe situation, that's what happened. It didn't get expended. It went to retained earnings. How come this isn't treated in the same fashion?
This is a policy that was set by the PUC that says any connection charges that are received by the water or sewer division are to remain in this reserve.
Okay, but
no, I think.
But this is not a connection charge.
It's part of retained earnings, to quite frankly.
Hold on. So just to back up for a moment. So account number 396, which is vehicles, it is one of the capital, is it a capital account that does not automatically roll forward? So if you don't spend your vehicle money in 396, then you have to basically ask for special permission to roll it forward. So that's what happened with the backhoe. If we didn't spend it, we would do that. The $350,000 is a reserve lockbox set up for the I&I. The $350,000 per year is generated directly from the basic service fee that all sewer division customers pay. So a portion of the basic service fee that you pay each quarter, or each sewer division customer pays each quarter, then funds that $350,000. It is a lockbox account.
When you say a lockbox account, it can't be moved out of there for any other purpose but the I&I.
Correct. That is my understanding.
That is correct.
So,
Okay.
so
That is correct, Councilman. Jim Bowes here.
So if you look, so $350,000 was the actual for ending June 30, 2019. The second column, fiscal year through 1/31/20 actual, is actually 7/12 of $350,000. So each month we just fund 1/4 of the reserve.
Oh, yeah, okay, I got that from the second call, yes.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, that's all.
I think this is a good opportunity. I just want to jump in. So $350,000, it goes straight to the basic service fee that every sewer division customer pays based on their meter size. We have approximately $2.1 million in this lockbox reserve. The sewer division recognizes that we are funding this account at a faster pace than we are spending it. We have a very robust I&I system. Our expenses just are less than our revenues. Because this goes directly to the basic service fee with a rate increase proposed to pay for the phosphorus upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant, we mitigated some of that increase for both the CCF charge, the consumption charge, and the basic service fee by lowering this by $300,000. So roughly $300,000. Let's presume 100% of our customers are all the same meter size, 13,500 customers. That goes directly to a quote savings on the basic service fee for the upcoming fiscal year. So I want to point that out.
I guess it begs the question, why even fund it at 50? You're not going to get anywhere near that this year.
We are actually starting to look at some larger projects, and we did not want to remove it completely.
Okay, we're not going to micromanage, but I'm sure that line, you've never reached that number, and you got $2 million in reserves that you can't move anywhere else. So,
correct.
Anyway.
Correct, and the $350,000 per year was agreed to when the I&I program was initiated in circa 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Last call for questions from the council for the sewer division. Questions from the public for the sewer division. And questions from the telephone regarding the sewer division. All right, that takes care of the public utilities. Thank you all for your participation and assistance and information. And we will now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We will now move on to the Youth and Social Services Bureau and
Good night, gentlemen.
good night. And I am guessing that Craig Turner is on the telephone because I don't see him logged in.
That is correct. Good evening, Councilman.
I think I think I have identified you as caller number 4. If you could speak again.
I can speak again. How's
There
that?
you are. All right, there you are, Mr. Turner.
Good evening.
Good evening. What would you like to tell us about your department budget?
Well, it followed the guidelines provided by the mayor in terms of no significant increases, if any, in the programming side of it. So we held to that. And the one thing that is different that I would bring to your attention is on the top part under the staffing piece. You can see that we removed one part-time person and added one hourly bargaining in an effort to create a position that would focus most of the time and effort on a community-wide effort to reduce substance abuse and to educate the general public on the issues related to substance use and abuse. And the title of that position will be known as a prevention coordinator. And we're looking forward to having someone in that position at the earliest halfway through the fiscal year, which is why you don't see a tremendous increase in the salary and wage portion of it. Most of the money will come from the salary that was pre-existing in the currently existing part-time position there. So that's the highlight of the actual budget for next year. Overall, given the conditions that are going on due to COVID-19, we're hopeful that we can find additional resources for assistance in people through FEMA, which we're looking at, and a few other sources beyond the town budget to try to be able to assist people at least through the summer and fall, if not beyond, into 2021.
Thank you very much. First counselor with questions is Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Mr. Turner.
Good evening, Councilman Shortell. How are you?
Doing okay. Doing okay. Need a haircut. That's what I tell everybody.
Yeah, I know that.
And I need to lose 15 pounds that I gained. I think my general question would be about, this obviously this crisis hit exactly at the wrong time in terms of your budget was likely already with the mayor, and now we're, going through it.
That is correct.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing the future, you have some, you have colleges that are canceling the fall semester or going to virtual classes. We don't know if what the situation will be in terms of large gatherings. Do you foresee, in terms of your programming in general, a different plan? I mean, I guess my question is, how is your plan? Do you have a plan for the fall or until we get a vaccine, or does it impact your programming, or do you just not know yet? Is it too soon to tell?
We know that it will be impacted. How that will look is hard to quantify at this point. So if large group activities are still off the table, for instance, Celebrate Wallingford and some of the other community events, that would include Red Ribbon Week. So we would have to look to formatting those differently. And in most cases, for the programs that we do, if those actual events aren't happening, we will not expend those dollars to the extent that we have in the past. One example that we're experiencing this year is Project Graduation. So now that we know that that event is not happening, according to the plan, we have to reconfigure what we may do in terms of recognizing the youth. Because of the need to have really tight controls over that event, we will not be having a large group activity at this point with that class. So we're looking at what other activity or gifting or recognition we can have. So those are the types of things that are impacted. And I suspect that anything that we would normally do in the fall will be impacted to some extent. And in most cases, it would reduce our expenditures, because I don't think that we would be able to recreate that same type of event. It would be something on a far smaller scale. So we wouldn't be putting money out for supplies and equipment like we would be normally.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. My only other questions, and Chairman Cervoni, this may not be the appropriate I don't know if it's appropriate. On the social services contributions, is that appropriate for tonight?
For my budget,
Yeah.
I have a line that is, I don't do the social service contributions. That runs out of the mayor's office. I have community grants, which sometimes is confused with that. So if you're asking questions related to the Coalition for a Better Wallingford, that does come out of my budget. Any
Okay.
other organization does not.
Then my questions would be for the, I guess then under the mayor's budget there, it's a question about the senior center and a question about the cemetery association.
Yeah,
So I
you're
guess
correct.
that
Those are under the mayor's.
okay,
guys.
then thank you. Thanks for everything you do. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the council? Any questions from the public? Participating through digital means?
So I would like to add one other comment if there are no other from the council.
At this point, no, there aren't. Go ahead.
So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce you to an initiative that we have actually initiated in January and February with a number of other organizations in town. And this is kind of a heads up that we hope you will participate in. And I'll explain that more fully. So far, our partners include the library, Wallingford Center, Inc., the Coalition for a Better Wallingford, the Senior Center, the Health Department, schools within the Department of Education, and Spanish Community of Wallingford, and the United Way of Meriden Wallingford. So what we're really looking to do is respond quite distinctly and purposefully to the COVID issue with optimism. So I have given to the mayor 9 copies of a book called Life is Good that I'm now indicating that we're going to get a copy of that to each councilman to read so that you have a sense of exactly what we're trying to do. It's a community-wide focus on developing optimism through the use of what are known as superpowers, which I will not get into now, but it's a pre-existing program that actually comes out of the Life is Good Foundation, which is a part of the Life is Good company. You may recognize the name by hats and t-shirts and a funny little man that's on that material. We are actually going to be and have a partnership with their foundation to become the first Life is Good branded town in the country. So that's all I'm going to say at this point. Once you read the books, you'll get a much greater sense of it. We will be rolling out more information. Our process has been delayed and interrupted somewhat by COVID. We're not able to meet with them face-to-face or in the same room. We've been doing a lot of video conferencing and putting things together. But to suffice it to say, it's a very exciting initiative, and I think it's something that will be very good for the town and in a very timely manner. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, I don't see more questions from the council. I just want to take a swing at the telephone. Any questions from the telephone callers?
One more.
All right, that appears to be it. Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. You have a good evening.
Thank you for your time. I actually, if I could add one more thing, which I forgot, I think it's worth saying. So I would like to thank Councilman Fishbein, but more importantly, Representative Fishbein, who in his foresight has provided my office, and I'm sure many other people, with the daily attachment email that gives us up-to-date information on executive orders and information coming out from the governor's office. Craig, that information has been invaluable to us to get out to the public with timely, accurate, succinct, clear, and concise information that I think has alleviated a lot of anxiety for people who are calling about stuff that they can't find answers anywhere else. So I just want you to know how much we appreciate that and the positive impact that's had for the people we've worked with. Thank you very much for that.
And I thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks. You Thanks, you too. All right. Moving on to page 46 in your budget book, Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Kenny Michaels is in.
Good evening, Kenny.
I believe Michelle's here as well.
Hi, good evening. Michelle Bjorkman, Superintendent of Recreation.
Yep. Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you have any introductory remarks to start with?
I do. So as you all are aware, the Wallingford Parks and Recreation Department is a essential quality of life service for the town of Wallingford. Our team strives to promote dynamic programs along with attractive public spaces where we look to cultivate inclusion, wellness, and vitality through the community. We also offer healthy and fun for all recreation, which includes sports and leisure choices, and as well as planning and developing natural outdoor resources and provide opportunities for cultural, creative expressions and growth for the members of our community. Our team and myself, we are happy and proud to propose our 2020-2021 budget, which reflects a decrease of 11.92% over fiscal year 2019-2020. A good portion of that decrease is the removal of the lifeguard staff and supervisors, with anticipation on some direction of where that project's going to head. With that said, we open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Tata.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, I just want to thank you for the great department. I really enjoy the Park and Rec programs. When I actually lived in another town years back, I would come to the Park and Rec for the fitness programs, and the instructors are great. So really great programs there. So thanks for that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it's really great. The instructors are amazing. One question I had on a specific line item, under playground instructors, this is under the personnel detail. It looks like that went up some in this year's budget. And I just wanted to know what exactly those are, and if the increase was just salary increases or why there was the increase there.
That is correct. It's the salary increase to keep up with the state mandated minimum wage.
Okay. And those playground instructors, is that for, those are for camp programs that you run?
That's correct. So those are for our summer playground camps, our 2 preschool camps that we offer in-house at the recreation department, and our teen travel camp.
Okay, great. And my only other question, and I don't know if this was just a typo because I don't think the numbers correlate, but in the supplement, it's the last page in our budget book. Number 1D, lifeguards, and it says an increase of 14,774. I'm assuming that was going to this past year, correct? Because you took the lifeguards out for this year.
That is correct. Actually, I don't have 1D in front of me.
This says lifeguard increase of 14,774 because the pool was extended for 2 weekends.
Yeah, that was last year, so I believe that is a typo. That should be out.
Okay, I just want to make 100% sure because I didn't see where the numbers lined up with that, so just double checking. And and then also with the current situation, the pandemic, have you? I mean, I know you've canceled a lot of programs. Do you have any idea of the savings that you might have because of the canceled programs thus far?
So we have an idea. It's not an exact figure right now. A lot of it is an estimate and I guess more of a guesstimate at this point. So what we did do is on March 16th, when we officially canceled our spring session, we did change the hours to the Parks and Recreation Department. We did just keep the business hours of 9 to 5. We did close the department for the evening hours of 5 to 10. And we're still currently following that model. So we do have a savings there in the part-time office salaries. We will have a savings due to our previous director's retirement in May until my appointment in August. And then upon filling the recreation program specialist position in February, there will be some savings there as far as management salary. Beginning April 6th, I believe, we readjusted our part-time office hours for the daytime staff. So estimate, if we're looking at it today, our ballpark figure could be anywhere between 120,000 and 130,000.
Okay, great. And yeah, and I understand that's just an estimate, but it helps to have some sort of an idea. So those are my only questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Counselor Laffin, you are on.
Thank you. Hi, Kenny. Sorry, I owe you a return phone call, and I haven't forgotten that.
That's okay.
I know it was a couple days ago, right? So the 11%ish, or the money you're saving on the lifeguard, that's so that's a recurring cost that we're not experiencing this year, but God willing, we will next year, right? If the pool project construction goes all right. So that's going to be, it's a savings. It's kind of a one-off windfall savings this year, but we're going to have to front those next year until we hope that some of the pool operational costs are subsidized by any revenue. Is that right?
That's correct. So if we put the 84.5 actually back into this budget hypothetically, and let's say the pool was open and we had to fund it, we'd still be turning in a budget that's at a negative 2.97%.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay, and I want everybody else to be thinking about the fact next year that when you come back and there's an increase because of, versus this year, that it's there's probably
that's a fair question. And with the minimum wage increase over the next 2 to 3 years, it's gonna, we got to get creative.
Yeah. Okay, that was it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the council? Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Kenny, just a quick follow-up to Councilor Laffin. Would the new pool require fewer lifeguards?
It will, but we're also going to have to staff somebody at the entrance. So looking at it right now, the way we looked at it, it looks like we could potentially be 2 lifeguards less than what we currently are now. But also, I mean, that'll be a wash because minimum wage will be creeping up to $13 and $14 and $15 down the road as it caps out. So, lifeguard costs now it'll end up being a wash, I think, in the long run.
And have there been discussions about? And we just had the vote last week, and I get that it's very, very early. Discussions about pricing next year for passes. I mean, we're going to be unveiling, a much nicer park. So, would there be an increase in order? Would the splash pad be included in the pool pass? Just question. I mean, you don't have to answer any of that. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, could that be another way to generate more revenue than we have in the past? Also, assuming we get more people attending.
Sure. No, it's a good point. We have tossed around ideas and put out different pricing scenarios. I will say more than likely there will be a price increase. That's more than likely going to happen. But we haven't really solidified costs, how we're going to price it. Day passes is also on the table for the potential of buying day passes online. But there's no really solid information that we do have or a solid plan. We're kind of like at that point putting the cart before the horse. We're just hoping that we kind of see where we're going with the project first.
Right. Well, the mayor has another day to veto it. Elephant in the room. So, okay, those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the council regarding the Park and Rec budget? Any questions from the public regarding the Park and Rec budget? And I will take one last swing through those on the telephone. Any questions from those on the telephone for the Park and Rec budget? All right.
Well, thank you all, and I do want to mention, Craig did forget us. Parks and Rec is also a part of the Life is Good project.
We'll forgive him. All right,
have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for your assistance and participation. That being all the business that we have on the agenda tonight, I will call the meeting to a close.
This conference is no longer being recorded.